Hello there. Welcome to the live stream with Buildbox and Kwalee. Welcome back for those of you that were on our last one. My name is Sean Connor, and I am the Community Director of Buildbox. I am here with Jack Parker and Alan Adham. You gentlemen would like to say some introductions and get this thing kicked off.
I'm Jack. I'm a publishing manager with Kwalee. I've been there since the start of the publishing department, and I've worked on projects like Rocket Sky, Submarine Jump, Overtake, and kind of had the opportunity to look at games from the very early prototype stages all the way to full development and global release.
My name is Alan Adham. I'm also a publishing manager at Kwalee. I've managed games like Clean Up 3D, Hook and Smash. One of the latest ones is called Flip Tumbling, and we've got a great lineup of games coming up soon. Like Jack, it's been great to kind of just be part of these games from kind of the early stages, kind of getting to see what some of these great ideas that are coming through and kind of nurturing them all the way into a global release. So it's fast and exciting.
Absolutely. Well, we're here to talk about a fantastic topic, and that is prototyping, the freshly announced Game Jam theme. What do you gentlemen have to say about prototyping?
I think it's a really good kind of topic, because especially in these hugely dominant markets like hyper casual on mobile, being able to produce ideas fast and fail fast and understand what does and doesn't work is absolutely crucial for a development studio's success. And being able to utilize that through things like Buildbox that help you really prototype quickly, and knowing what you should and shouldn't include within that can really help take a development studio to that next level in that area of the industry.
We also find when you are prototyping, you tend to learn a lot more about game development quickly. So in reality, you can end up doing 3 games in the space that you might have done one as a full development. So in reality, you might have tried out 3 different skills, learned 3 different skills, refine them a little bit more. So the prototypes, then you start to create even a third one in the timeline. They start to get much better. So these prototypes are only a couple of days. It's stuff that we do internally, is we get all our kind of best people and make these quick prototypes, see if it works. If it doesn't, as Jack said, we kill it, and we kill early and then just move on.
Allows you to pivot, allows you maneuverability, and you can find out what's successful really quickly. All right, so let's kick this off. What did you see from our very first Game Jam together that you think creators should make sure they keep doing for this one?
I think a big one of this was just a lot of different creativity. So all of the mechanics and visuals that we're kind of seeing came from all different inspirations. And then we were also seeing a lot of unique touches to the games as well. Looking at One Wheel, for example, they had different sort of fail animations depending on what cosmetic you were playing as. And even though that might not necessarily be applicable to an early prototype, just being able to kind of separate yourself from a standard hyper casual game is really, really important. And if Buildbox users are able to keep doing that, then that's huge potential.
We saw as well some really strong ideas that came through, and there were ideas that kind of some of us had never seen before. There's one of the games called Totterbox. It was almost like an Indiana Jones style platform kind of physics game, and it was something that as a publishing manager I'd not seen before, and pretty much most of it hadn't seen. So what was really good was just some of the originality of some of these ideas that were coming through. It was we were very, very kind of surprised and pleasantly surprised of how good some of these ideas coming through were, and how unique they were, because a lot of people use other games as kind of inspiration, but there were some really unique ideas that was great to see.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The old model and improve, but sometimes it is nice to break the mold with a new idea, a new concept. What were the things that you saw that the entrances to the Game Jam could maybe improve on? Do you have any tips?
I think a general tip, and that I think is beneficial to take into account when you're kind of building these prototypes, is a lot of the time you want to try and get them as bright and colorful as possible. Looking at the 2 examples we provided, they were 2 very bright games that didn't kind of narrow down into one kind of theme too hard. So it was very kind of approachable for everyone. You didn't kind of look at it and go, I don't like sci-fi, so I won't like that. It was fun ragdoll characters and very kind of just applicable to everyone, and making sure that you don't produce a game that is too dark or hard to understand what's going on, is kind of really, really crucial.
There was also one thing is worth mentioning as well with some of the prototypes is not waiting too long to kind of introduce new gameplay into the games, because obviously some people like the idea of their game and they kind of continue to make these levels that are very, very similar. Something that needs to kind of happen, especially in the world of hyper casual, is introducing these new exciting gameplay features quite quickly. So almost like gives us kind of the idea is there is this sense of progression in the game, and there's potentially more and more further down the line is how you end up keeping them gripped. And obviously tying in with that as well, just like a clear line of progression. It's something that it's so easy to miss, but it's so simple to have in the game. Making sure that the user knows that there is more to come along, and it's such a clear line of progression, so they don't have to think about, oh, what might be next is a case. So you just introduce new things and they just flow nicely into the game.
So you want to break the monotony, and you want to make sure you give that player a little aha moment earlier rather than later, so you can really.
It's a really nice like sense of satisfaction. They play it and they go, it's like the little moment inside where you go, that was so cool. Yeah. You think to yourself, I need to play another one kind of to see what might happen next, if there's something else that might get introduced.
You feel like productive almost as well, like you're actually, progressing, moving forward, actually getting somewhere, and those little like nice rewarding moment to moment pieces of gameplay is always super important.
I think in today's world everybody enjoys feeling a little productive, right?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, I'll go on to the next question. This game jam will be very short and is all about creating the best prototype. What defines a good prototype to you?
So I think an important one is just understanding, where to focus your time. In, maybe like a full-fledged prototype, you might look for around like 15 plus levels or 15 minutes gameplay, for example. But, in these ones, in this kind of short window, you only really need to be producing, I'd say, like 1 to 3 levels. And the objective of those being to kind of clearly show off your game mechanic and a good level of visual polish to try and like entice users to want to play it, and to be able to put the concept of the prototype forward in a way that's very easily understandable to, for example, a publisher of what direction the game is going. So kind of stripping out those additional levels, and then potentially things like you don't necessarily need like cosmetic stores, things like that can all wait until you further through the development cycle. And so just knowing kind of where to focus your efforts is quite important.
So building on what Jack said as well, it's like what's really good for these prototypes and kind of getting this really nice visual feel is using like the asset store. So like the Buildbox asset store will have so much in there, because what then that allows you to do is to focus on that core piece of gameplay. Because what I speak to my developers about is get that core gameplay refined, get it feeling smooth, feeling satisfactory, has all the key elements of the game in it. And then you then have that time afterwards to just start kind of fleshing out the visual aspects of the game by using these kind of pre-made assets. It's what they're there for. Because the idea is you want to make sure that the game feels great before it then looks great. You don't want it to be the other way around.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's a good point as well. Like you said, having a clear understanding of like what you want your game to be, like the mechanic, and like what you actually want that game loop to be, and then building on top of it, I think that's a really good point.
I would agree 100%. Is that why the theme for prototyping was chosen?
We've tried, I think over the time, we've tried different ways of kind of seeing how we can get, obviously failing early is something as we kind of commonly say around the office. So it seems like doing these prototypes tests, it allows you to kind of, in these very small teams, quick, like short development bursts, and get these prototypes ready. And it allows us to quickly figure out what's going to work and what isn't, what's trending, what might not be, having a look at current trends, trying something like that, or going the complete opposite way and going with something completely original. Doing this, it means that we're not spending weeks on a prototype. It means we're spending only a few days. And within that few days, we get the core gameplay there, and we give it a test and see if it works.
Yeah, I think even from just like a fun standpoint as well, getting that opportunity to kind of have that creative outlet, run with lots of different ideas, and kind of getting into that habit is always, an enjoyable experience. That's why we kind of incorporate into like Creative Wednesdays, where we get everyone involved and always just brainstorming prototypes and bouncing ideas off each other. It's a good kind of habit to get into.
Yeah, and it also means that we can develop new skills quicker. Like when we're bringing everybody in, everyone's sharing their kind of knowledge because everyone has specialities in gaming and stuff like that. So you end up kind of doing all these different prototypes and learning all these different skills. And effectively, you start building like tech for yourself. You've got like these really cool ideas that you go to think, I like this idea. You can start combining the different prototypes together to go, this game is not something that's been seen before. Let's give this a try. So it's really nice for being able to kind of speedily kind of create these really exciting games.
100%. So what are the benefits of prototyping?
Yeah, so I think kind of like Alan mentioned, just you learn the most when you fail, and being able to fail early, learn that, carry it forward is always huge. But then also just being able to try out ideas. If you have, for example, like 3 or 4 ideas, if you're able to quickly try them all out, get them to a minimum stage, and then understand, okay, this is the one that has the most potential, because we're all biased. If you make something, it's like your baby, and you think, oh, this one's going to be great, I prefer this one to this other one I made. Being able to just prototype that, put it out there, see how people like it, is a really good way at just understanding how best to spend your time.
We found it creates like almost like the building blocks of a game, because in reality you're only spending a few days on these prototypes. You can quickly find where the potential is. As Jack mentioned, you could be trying all 3-4 different ideas that you think, oh, this one might work, this one might work. You'll very, very quickly realize which one works, and then from that you can obviously, when you get to touch with like people like Kwalee, and we kind of give you some kind of real in-depth developer feedback. From that, you can then start to kind of flesh this idea out into something a lot more substantial, knowing that something about your game actually works, which is a really cool way of looking at it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, actually. Like a prototype is a really good stage to go and seek feedback. Even whilst you're producing it, bouncing ideas, helping to kind of whittle down to the best ones is always good. But if you do have like a prototype, approaching someone like us, a publisher like Kwalee, it's a good, foundation, like Alan mentioned, for us to be able to get in and say, okay, you've got a fantastic core game here. Based on what we've seen, based on what's happening in the market, here's some like polishing features that we think would really benefit the game, and here's like maybe a direction to potentially try and steer it before it gets too late into that kind of development cycle, and you've sunk in like months, and it's obviously a lot more difficult to kind of make that direction change.
So it's a beautiful conduit for the collaborative process, especially between developer and publishers such as Kwalee. And the quickness of Buildbox, of course, is a huge boon there as well to prototyping.
Exactly, yeah. It's perfect. When it comes to prototyping, anything that you can do to help make that process faster is a huge benefit. And Buildbox definitely allows that with all of the asset selections, all of the kind of core gameplay features that are in there as well. There's a lot to really help streamline that process.
And the best part is, after a couple of days you've made a game, you can come and talk to us. This is what the great part is. We can provide you with some really valuable feedback. We've got a plethora of people internally who are really excited about working with Buildbox and kind of seeing what's coming through. So they're actively wanting to see what kind of games we've got coming through this kind of like the game jam. So this is the kind of feedback we can start giving to developers so early on, where they can actually be like, wow, these guys are actually invested in our games just as much as they are in making games.
Absolutely. All right, so let me ask, just how important is gameplay to a good prototype?
For me, it's the first thing I tell my developers. Having that core mechanic of a prototype is the building blocks of the game itself. If you have something that is clunky, it doesn't work well, and it's not smooth, it's immediately going to show off in some of the videos. Your videos could be really well presented with like these lovely assets you brought in, but in reality, it won't look as good or as enticing. You really want it to be exciting. So you watch the video in the first couple of seconds, be like, wow, this actually looks really smooth, it plays great. So for me, whenever I talk to my developers, it has to be the development side has to be first.
Yeah, I think I agree as well. Like, you can make the prettiest looking game if there isn't like a fun kind of in capturing 30-second, minute-long game loop, that you have a clear understanding of, this is the process I want the player to go through. This is how it's going to like push them forwards. This is going to be where the bits of like reward for them and fun moments are going to be. I'll loop that, and then how do I bring that out and kind of portray it to them with nice visuals. If you don't have that fun loop at the beginning, it's really hard to build on top of that, because if the structure of your prototype isn't quite there or enticing, then it doesn't really matter how pretty it is. It's going to struggle to keep players interested, or even some might look at the gameplay or the store pages and think, yeah, it's really pretty, but it's not really something that I'm interested in playing. So having that strong foundation definitely makes the whole process a lot easier.
Yeah, I'd agree 100% there as well. I could say in about almost 6 years of seeing Buildbox games, thousands upon thousands of them, I've seen a lot of very pretty portraits, but they rang pretty hollow once you got a minute in, 2 minutes in, and you don't usually get that long in this industry.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you really do, only have a limited window to kind of impress people and give them that, I want to come back feeling. And the visuals might help them get them through the door, but if there's nothing kind of substantial there or fun there left, then they're likely to not be too interested.
It also ties in whether you want to call it the fortunate or unfortunate beast of hyper casual, in the sense that the trends are changing so quickly that you really want to get that the development of the game first and get it tested, rather than having to spending all this time on visuals and then having to go and do all the development work. It's almost like it takes twice as long, when in reality, when you've got the assets ready for you from the store, it almost like it halves your development time. So the prototype will have this really nice mechanic that you can just start to flesh out when you have time.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because it's very easy to play around with visuals and test them out and kind of almost weigh them up against each other, but you need that gameplay mechanic to be there, and kind of a solid core to be able to assess what if I make it brighter, what if I try out some different assets, or how can I change this. It's much easier to do that on a kind of visual level than it is to try and change that foundation of the prototype.
Gotcha. On that note, how important are visuals to the prototype?
I mean, the asset store makes this makes it a great part of the game development side, because you've obviously focused on the core part of developing the game, but then you have this time to start fleshing it out. Obviously the visual side of hyper casual is important. We usually do something internally where we're looking at these bright pastely colors. It's nothing too harsh, nothing too bright. It's bright, but it's kind of soft on the eyes. It just looks enticing. It looks exciting, and it's one of those ones where even if things are going on, a lot of things are happening in the screen, because the colors are so pleasant on the eyes, your eyes are almost like enjoying this wondrous event that you're watching on the screen.
Yeah, and I think obviously the mechanic is huge, but with prototypes, the closer you can get them visuals to looking as close to the final product as possible, the better, because that kind of helps portray the image of your game and its potential. You do need a very good foundation with the mechanic for that, but you also want to be sinking in a lot of the time into those visuals, and it's the visuals that you think are going to have the most impact as well. So the making sure that you're choosing the brightest and most appropriate assets, making sure that where players are spending their most time is the visuals you're polishing. So the actual gameplay loops, as opposed to say cosmetic stores or level end screens, things like that aren't as important as the actual gameplay loop itself. So just think about, if I was watching some gameplay footage, or if I was, going to play this, where am I spending my most time in the prototype, and what can I do to make that bit of the loop, as visually appealing to the user as possible? Because, it does feel good to, if you're playing a prototype, if it does look nice, it feels nice. So it kind of goes hand in hand with the core mechanic.
Kind of building on Jack's, obviously, kind of appealing to the audience as well, is one thing you can avoid doing is being too niche with your artwork. The idea is with hyper casual, because it's such a popular and fast-paced kind of industry, you want it to appeal to as many people as possible. So obviously maintaining a much broader kind of concept for your art is much better than going down this niche road where you think, oh, everyone who sees this, who likes this, is going to enjoy it, when in reality you want to try and have as big a scope as possible.
So with visuals, you want to cast a wide net.
Yeah.
All right. With the short 72-hour time scale in mind, Have you got any tips for how our boxers should approach the game jam?
Yeah, so I think one thing that you're going to do is have someone, whether it's family, friends, a coworker, just to like bounce ideas off of. It's good to kind of, even in that planning stage, figure out, what do I actually want to make and what's it going to look like? And just being able to whittle those down and get different perspectives is always really useful, so that you're not fleshing it out too much, getting too far into it, and then having to kind of come back and apologies for the rain.
It's worth looking into. Have a quick look online. Can I have a look through the top 50 games that are on the store? Have a quick look, see what's working, what isn't, what art style works, what doesn't. You'll very quickly realize what some of the fundamentals of these games are. Then you can actually start to take them across to your idea. But it will spark the interest as well. As like when we do our games internally and we do our Creative Wednesdays, when you're watching people's pitches, you start to think of your own pitches at the same time. So it's really it's a really good idea to take a bit of time before you start going and just like, right, I'm going to make this game. Just spend a bit of time looking at what's working and what isn't, and kind of what themes have worked and what you've seen that kind of falls down the charts. And by doing this, it gives you that really kind of this strong concept once you come up with something that people will like this. It's there, it's got the legs, and you've done a little bit of research, along with what Jack mentioned about talking to people and bounce your ideas off, because it gets that kind of creative spark going, and that's really important for a game jam.
Yeah, and I think just like at every stage, when you're working on it, ask yourself, is this something that when someone's playing my prototype or I'm trying to pitch it to someone, is it something where they're actually going to be spending time? Because, there's lots of like rabbit holes and traps that you can fall into about, I want to build a bunch of really cool, like looking cosmetics, and, that's a common one, but just asking yourself that question, how relevant is this for an initial look at my gameplay loop? And just keeping that in the back of your head at all times.
And also, don't get too bogged down if you come across a problem. If the problem isn't really affecting the game itself and it's more based like cosmetics or it's a bit more flary, move on. Don't spend too much time on it, because you've only got 72 hours. So in reality, you just want to be spending that time doing as much development work, not focusing too much on kind of single elements of the game. Try and get this kind of like the core loop and the core gameplay as refined as you can, and just try to just not get bogged down.
I think that applies to like, bug fixes and like unusual behavior as well. If it's kind of like an edge case where if a player does something very, very specific in this specific circumstance, maybe they teleport a little bit. Like, don't worry about that in a prototype. That's something that you can revisit, come back to later. Just focus on getting that core loop as good and polished as possible.
In reality, from these prototypes, we're going to be creating, like, so if you think about it, you're going to be making some really nice videos to kind of show this game off. So in reality, if there are little bugs and kind of little glitches and stuff like that, if it's very specific, it's no problem, because in reality, you're going to make videos where you'll know what part of the games you need to show to make it look as nice as it is.
You mentioned bringing others, and having friends, relatives, family, maybe to throw ideas and have them prototype and test the game for you. I know when I worked with Trey Smith, who created Buildbox, back when we were working on games like Lines End and Phases, he used to joke that his best testers were his young daughters. Do you guys specify like an age range, or maybe some age range within your friends or family maybe you should be targeting?
Yeah, I think like people who are like ultimately hyper casual. There's people at all ages involved, and we do see people show interest no matter the age. But I think like the largest target audience is sort of between that 13 to sort of like 22, 24 age range is like quite common. But getting different people's perspectives on it is always really good as well, because they're always going to have unique ideas and viewpoints. But if you've got kids, if you've got relatives, definitely ask them. Kids will always be honest as well, so you're definitely going to get the feedback, even if you don't necessarily want to hear some of it. So
it provides a fresh perspective. We know there's plenty of people internally that will share prototypes with their children, and they'll come in the next day and be like, right, we need to change this, and this, because they just couldn't get it. In reality, a hyper-casual game should be so linear and so smooth that people can just pick it up and play. So it's a case of whether it is a young person at the age of like 13 or something like that, or if you ask your parent, just have a look at this for me and see it. And if they find it really fiddly, then there might be something wrong with the controls. It all brings a really kind of fresh perspective to kind of the game you're making, because you're so focused on it, you tend to lose the perspective of the game you're making.
That's a really good point as well. Like talking to people who aren't necessarily familiar with the games industry, things like that, because it does need to be understandable within a few seconds, both controls, what are you trying to accomplish. So getting people outside of the industry's viewpoints can be really, really valuable.
All right, so we have the final early question sent in, and then if we have a little time after, we'll answer some of the customer questions from the feed or the viewer questions. Finally, what other tips do you have for everyone taking part in this game jam?
My first one would be learn to fail fast. That's something we've done internally. We take on. It's a little bit of a tough pill to swallow sometimes, because as Jack mentioned earlier, sometimes your project is your baby, kind of, so to speak. You kind of spend a bit of time on it. But if you feel like it's not got the legs and it's not exciting you as you're creating this game, kill it and move on. Because in reality, you'll know when a game has passion behind it. When a developer goes, I like this idea, this has got legs, this is something I want to do. This is when you can see these games that have got the passion kind of working through them.
Yeah, exactly. And I think don't be afraid to brainstorm a few different ideas, or even if you've got like a core concept, you want to make sure even in that time pressure, you're thinking about, what direction do I want to take this? Is it going to be something that a player can easily accomplish and kind of handle? Is it going to be clear on what's going on? And just taking the time, even though, it does feel fast, but Buildbox is there to help accelerate huge parts of this development cycle. So making sure that you think about what you're doing and how it's going to look as an end prototype, even at the beginning, can sometimes be good. And then just making those tweaks as you go about oh, actually this looks a bit better, or this feels a bit better. Don't be afraid to then twist off of that idea slightly, sort of as you go.
I've always said with the developers I work with, when you're making them have fun, have a quick look online, kind of see what's around. But then with your idea that you're making, have fun with it. It's a case of, this is your game. It's 72 hours to try and make a game. It's a challenge you set yourself, but have fun while you're doing it. As we know, there's assets there. Buildbox makes the ability to make games really easy. So in reality, a lot of the stuff is there for you to use. So you might as well use it and just enjoy the experience, because even our developers now are constantly learning new things, and this is exactly what game jams are all about. It's about finding something that you enjoy doing and just learning something new, and kind of hopefully create something really exciting.
All right, well, I think we have time for maybe just one or two viewer questions. Our first comes from RK. Is music or sound effects necessary for the prototype?
So I would say in a prototype, you don't really need to worry about it too much. You want to spend most of your time, in that core gameplay loop. And a lot of people, when they're playing these games, or if it's coming up in social media, they'll actually have their sound turned off. So I would say, get the actual visuals, the mechanic, everything looking as solid and good as you can. If you have time afterwards, you can put in some sound effects, but I wouldn't really, carve out a chunk of time for that. I think there's always something that you can be doing for either the visual side or the gameplay side.
If you like sounds, there is always the option of, when you're starting to kind of create the videos for kind of like testing and stuff like that, you have the freedom then to add in the sounds. You almost just like lay them over the game. So in reality, your game looks like it has sound, but in reality, it's not too important on the prototype stage.
All right, our second viewer question comes from Andre K. Should we focus on gameplay, or should we think about monetization too?
I would focus on gameplay for a prototype, because the idea is you're trying to get this core mechanic implemented and finished. So monetization comes a bit further on, and that's something that we can talk to the developers about when we're testing and stuff like that. But in reality, during a game jam, if you've only got 72 hours, focus on that core gameplay. Because in reality, you only need to create 1 or 2 levels. You don't need to be creating this plethora of like 15, 20 levels. It's only 1 or 2 levels. Get it really refined, looking polished, and give you that little, as you mentioned, that little aha moment that it's really satisfying.
The they kind of go hand in hand as well. Like if you're able to build this really solid prototype and then develop that into a really fun, awesome looking game, then that benefits the monetization side later on. So if you're concerned about well, how is this actually going to monetize, and still making sure that you spend enough time just on that the actual game itself is really, really crucial to that.
All right, I'll do one last viewer question. This one comes from Zurich. Will Kwalee accept games with the same mechanics of another game?
I mean, I don't see why not. If you have a look at games that are already on the store, a lot of them share the same mechanics. It's the gameplay idea that itself and the theme behind it, the visuals, the moments of satisfaction, they're all different. This is why hyper-casual is such a kind of great market to be in, because there are very similar kind of games out there with their gameplay functions, but in reality, when you put them side by side, they are quite different. So we won't really have too much of an issue as long as there is kind of an originality to their idea, even though the mechanic might be similar.
Yeah, you want to be looking for like unique twists on it. If you do look at the the App Store, it's common. Some will have like those similarities in the mechanics, but at the same time, it does also make it much harder for your game to stand out and draw new users in, because if they're looking at it and they see all those similarities, they might think, well, it's potentially a little bit I've played that. So taking that core mechanic and putting like a unique twist on it is a really good approach to kind of helping you generate ideas. You might want to end up like fleshing out that unique twist into more of a game. But yeah, it's okay to look for inspiration, but just getting that kind of, like Alan said, the originality mixed in with it is quite important.
Absolutely. All right. I want to thank everybody that's tuned in today. We will have this available for replay if you missed maybe the beginning or parts of it. If we didn't get time to get to your question, please still send them in. We'll be happy to attend to them, and we'll either answer them in between or on the next live stream or before the game jam. Jack, Alan, do you have any last thoughts?
I think like Alan said, it's a fun experience. So don't get too stressed. Don't let it get you down. It's an opportunity to express creativity and have a good time. Lean on the people around you, and we're really looking forward to taking a look at your games.
Same. Have fun, enjoy it, learn from it, stock up on energy drinks if need be, keep yourself going. But in all, just have fun with it.
That sounds great. I want to thank you both so much for your time and Kwalee. And I'm looking forward to this game jam and seeing what gets produced, and as well as I'm sure you all are as well. Thank you once again, everybody, for tuning in, and we look forward to talking to you on the next live stream.
Thank you very much.
Have a great weekend. Thank you.